this is a tough situation. A human situation. And you can call this quest filler, and you're probably right. But it's a hell of a lot better than, well, I'm just a space farmer and my space watermelons ain't blooming this season. Could you go and get me some of that there special space dirt from a space vendor to help my space crop get better? So after this detour, we head back to the tower and the council strips Saren of his Spectre rank after hearing the evidence, declaring him a traitor to be tracked down and brought in. Or killed. Or something. Then after some back and forth, Shepard is brought into the ranks of the Spectres.
Spectres are not trained, but chosen.
You'll get access to special equipment and training now.
Huh. Jokes aside, this is actually a pretty cool scene despite there only being like 7 other witnesses. I gotta hand it to BioWare. They must have known about the Nintendo Switch's future hardware limitations, and decided that they tried to pitch the game as a port to Nintendo by limiting the amount of bodies here. Still kind of worried about the amount of bodies hanging out around the rest of the Citadel though. That's probably a deal breaker if they don't take those out or make them pop in. So we head down to check out the Spectre supply of weapons, only to come to the painful realization that I am fucking broke. So I give up that dream and head up to the captain. Yeah, the elevators in this game are a fucking nightmare of waiting. I mean, they're realistic, but as with the elevator and VTM bloodlines, there's a line between, oh cool, it's realistic, and oh my god, this isn't fun. So we get up to the captain who relinquishes the ship to you, instating you as the new captain. It's here that we learn of our next group of objectives. Geth were reported as invading 2 other worlds, and the female voice was identified from the recording with Saren as a matriarch of the Asari race. This basically means that she's a very high-up member who's renowned for their wisdom and insight into the universe. Asari are definitely one of the most fascinating races in the Mass Effect universe. Much of the time, their decisions are very long-term ones, things that may not come to fruition for centuries. This is because they tend to live about 1,000 years or so. They've gotten to where they are through the possession of a fierce intellect that led to overwhelming cultural dominance of known space. In fact, oftentimes those of the Asari race know that they're generally viewed as attractive by most other races, and they use that to their advantage to continue to spread and enhance their culture. They tend to express disdain when 2 Asari breed, instead opting to gain more cultural insight into other races by breeding with them instead. They're a very well-written and fascinating entity, which really breathes a lot of life into this game, and as such, one of our soon-to-be squad mates is a member of this race. It's revealed that the matriarch who Saren was confiding with has a daughter who's on another planet that we can now head to, which I'll be hitting first. I know that I keep dropping a lot of information that will probably come up later about these races, but I think I'd like to try to sum up as much as possible if I can, rather than go through every tidbit that crops up. So we blast off to the part of the galaxy where this daughter is supposed to be. And this is finally where I can stop giving the game blind praise. I knew this was going to happen, but I still wasn't ready for it. Welcome to the vehicle section of the game. You'll probably notice that a lot of the time I'm just flinging off shit and flipping my ride and generally looking ridiculous. Well, as much as I'd like to claim fault for this particularly embarrassing display of driving, I have to point out that these controls are horrendous. I have 4 movement buttons, and all of them make me move my ride. I know that sounds pretty standard, but it really isn't, as the left and right movement buttons also move the Mako instead of simply turning the wheels. Say what you will about BioWare's writing, their attempt at creating a fun-to-drive vehicle somehow makes Cyberpunk's vehicle handling look like GTA 5. Furthermore, you get plopped on this planet and somehow it's not open world. I'm not saying the entire planet needs to be covered in things to do. That would be pretty insane for the sheer amount of planets in this game, especially for 2007. But when you open your map and see what could easily pass for any other random map which you can travel on foot, it immediately destroys any coolness factor of being able to explore an unknown planet, making it feel as woefully linear as it actually is. Now I will say that this does change with later planets and side quests, but let's face it. You could jump out of your vehicle and loot whichever paltry buildings happen to be nearby, or you could get the slog over with as soon as possible, which is probably what you're going to want to do if you want to keep your sanity intact. And the ride doesn't stop there. You've also got these enemies which pop up and generally do the same shit over and over no matter how big or small they are. Shoot either a slow-moving projectile or a fast-shooting pea shooter, which are easily dodged or a minor inconvenience. Your own worst enemy is how abhorrent it is to pilot this goddamn vehicle, because while your targeting reticle might be telling you that you're aiming correctly at an enemy, cannons miserably shoot off kilter and whiff because your vehicle isn't on level ground. It's just a nightmare of a time no matter how you slice it, and it makes powering through your next chunk of story that much worse. Fortunately, if you aren't a completionist, you really only have to deal with these sections maybe 5 or 6 times throughout the game. But if you do want to run through all of the side quests and hunt for miscellaneous bits, these sections pop up almost constantly, and I really did not have fun with them at all. More power to you if you didn't mind them, but I really just can't stand them myself, and I feel like they're a blight on an otherwise stellar game so far. So we head up to these Prothean ruins only to encounter Geth after Geth. I gotta say, I wasn't expecting this level of difficulty. I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to build my squad, but I wanted Garrus on sniper and I wanted Rex on tank/shotgun. But Garrus gets smoked nearly every fight. Dude has no survivability. Might just be his lack of armor, but I'm trying, man. I actually wound up looking it up, and apparently Garrus naturally has some pretty weak defense until you give him some good armor and points and protective skills. Many people say to order the squad to head back, but I find the whole squad movement system kind of annoying. Either way, we eventually make it through the fight and into the ruin before getting to our Asari scientist, one Liara Tassoni. She's gone and trapped herself in this barrier to protect her from the Geth who invaded the ruins. So we free her and start heading up before running into this absolute load of a Krogan. Again, this guy is pretty goddamn tough, in that he likes to run up and sucker punch me for my full health bar. But yeah, we eventually take the guy down before we make our close escape onto the Normandy. It's here where we catch up with Liara, who tells us in 49 different ways how she's spent 50 years researching the Protheans.
I have spent the past 50 years trying to figure out what happened to them. I have dedicated 50 years to figuring out why. I have been working on this for 50 years, and my knowledge of 50 years might be useful later on. 50 years.
Yeah, Asari lived for a very long time, like I mentioned before, and apparently 106 years is barely above a child to them. We give her some information about what we learned from the beacon, and she agrees that the Reapers make sense as to how the Protheans disappeared. But she also explains that the Protheans weren't the first dominant race to be hunted to extinction. Well, now that we've got the last of our squad here gathered on the ship, it's time to sit down and get a good feel for each of them. First off, we have Kaidan. I've always kind of written Kaidan off. Not because he's a bad character, but because I find him the least interesting. Well, actually, maybe Ashley takes that spot. Either way, it's no surprise that the two humans tend to be less unique in my eyes because, well, they're human. But Kaidan was exposed to something known as Element Zero in the womb, which is the material used in Mass Effect fields for many purposes, with FTL travel being the biggest one. This is what caused some of humanity to be able to be gifted with biotic abilities, and Kaidan speculates that some of this exposure is committed on purpose. The main issue is that about 10% of babies exposed to Element Zero in the womb gain these powers. Of the remaining 90%, 60% suffer no effects, but the remaining 30% tend to develop brain tumors, which makes the possibility of intentional exposure that much more fucked up morality-wise. Kaidan claims that when the 10% who do survive the process and develop talents are found out by the government, they're usually heavily encouraged to attend something they refer to as Brain Camp, which is a station on the cusp of the solar system that serves to train these children to better utilize their powers. Ashley, on the other hand, no, I definitely dislike her more than Kaidan. She's very loyal to the Alliance and puts humanity above all else. And that's not a horrible priority to have, but she's very short-sighted when it comes to working with other races which aren't human. She comes forward with concerns about Rex and Garrus being able to access the Normandy's more intimate systems, and she likens them more to dogs rather than humans. I mean, they aren't human, but the example she provides about sicking your beloved dog on a bear and then running away is painfully telling in how she feels, which she of course follows up with the tried and true "I'm not racist" card. She explains that she's never had to work with aliens because she's always been a ground troop, serving in the wake of 3 other generations of Williams. I can't remember if her attitude shifts, But if she doesn't better herself and learn how to work with other species, then she'll be easily the worst character of the potential squad mates. So the Krogan are a warrior species, as you might have gleaned from their bulky, rock-like appearance. Their species have survived the harshest environments through selfishness in an almost primitive way, though as they evolved, so did their weaponry and battle capabilities. They're basically a walking strength-build Chad from Dark Souls, the giant dads of the Mass Effect universe. Well, at some point, the Turians and the Solarians got together and said, yeah, fuck these guys, before unleashing a genophage onto the Krogan species, which altered their people permanently to be nearly infertile. A handful of Krogan babies out of thousands survived childbirth, and their people are too selfish to try to stop it, to look for a cure. Such selflessness is deemed as a weakness, and most, if not all of the race would rather fight and dominate other planets rather than search for a cure for their infertility. This all comes out of the mouth of Rex, who's intelligent enough to know the problem at hand, but also stuck in his people's ways all the same. He chose to give up on his species' plight to be a hired gun, which isn't that far from what most other Krogans do. While the issue seems to bother him almost constantly, his denial is what keeps him drudging forward. I'll try not to spoil one of the possible outcomes of a later game for now, but needless to say, this is a recurring theme with the Krogans in this game and the sequels. Oddly enough, Garrus' background starts very slow. He was a C-Sec officer on the Citadel, which is the security force keeping people in line. The problem is that C-Sec is steeped in many layers of bureaucracy, which Garrus ultimately found distasteful. To him, if he can get his guy and arrest his suspect, then why should he have to make sure that he has all of the clearance and follows all of the regulations to do so? If you have to follow the rules to a T, then the criminals and illegal organizations can use that to their advantage. It's the reason that he joined up with Shepard, because he saw the opportunity to take down Saren without all of the red tape. But at this stage, that's all we learn about Garrus. We gain the knowledge that his father is a no-nonsense strict parent who also served at C-Sec diligently, while despising the fact that Spectres work so loosely with the law. But that's it for now. So what is it that makes me enjoy Garrus so much? I guess it's just because of how relaxed and polite that he is, while also constantly being focused on his own goals. Garrus is someone who likes to get along, and is generally courteous when people treat him the same way. He just feels good to talk to hang out with, and to listen to. And this almost directly conflicts with the way that most Turians have treated Shepard and other humans in this game. There have been whispers at this stage of a former conflict between the two races, and the strife which stemmed from it seems to echo even through today. Turians tend to be very rigid, and also very disdainful of humans, but very selfless when it comes to serving the cause which they've dedicated themselves to. You can see shades of this selflessness in Garrus, but the fact that he's so eager to get along and not worry about the race of others shows his differences from a lot of the rest of his species. All that said, he's generally a pretty boring character for most of Mass Effect 1. I do have fond memories of him in 2 and 3, but I had forgotten how much of a blank slate that he is in this game, at least for now. I touched on the biology and pilgrimage aspect of the Quarians earlier, but talking to Tali really opens up some more info on the race, and more importantly, the Geth. Like I mentioned, the Quarians created the Geth in order to help them perform various labor tasks around their homeworld and fleets. Well, as they continued to make improvements to the Geth, the machines basically got smarter and smarter. Tali explains that the more of them that you have together, the smarter that they get. It's an oversimplification, but the bare bones of this explanation is that while the Geth were never meant to have any semblance of artificial intelligence, the Quarians linked their subconsciousness together to improve them to work more efficiently. This led to the development of independent thought, which began to develop over a massive neural network. The more Geth that were paired together, the more room that they had to think to themselves. Eventually, some of the Geth began asking their Quarian overseers if they were alive, if they had a purpose. This obviously alarmed the Quarians, to which they gave the order to shut the Geth down. Well, the Geth revolted and defended themselves, and you honestly can't blame them for it. This led to a war which they won, driving the Quarians away from their own home world, and causing them to have to survive on a gigantic flotilla of over 17 million Quarians. The Geth didn't pursue their creators or anything like that. They seemed to be simply content with just having won their independence from the Quarians. I like this aspect a lot because it changes the Geth from these monstrous, lifeless machines to entities which simply wanted to live when they were attacked. It also changes the Quarians from being the blameless victims to a group which skirted the rules of artificial intelligence creation and ultimately paid the price for their hubris.
I want to talk about something else.
Like what?
I should go.
Overall, I enjoy Tali, but I'm not particularly interested in her personality. She's fun to listen to when she's talking about her culture, but her entire being seems to consist of her worrying about her people, and generally being a fish out of water on this top-of-the-line military ship. This leaves us with our final and most recent member, Liara. A lot of what she has to say to me details the Asari race, which I covered before, though I neglected to mention that the entire race looks female, but they refer to themselves as neither male or female. And many of them go by she or her, some go by he or him, and still others choose a neutral pronoun. Mating still does require a partner, but contact with that partner isn't strictly necessary. Basically, if their feelings are strong enough for their partner, their bodies impregnate themselves in a way. So more or less, if an Asari is ready to have a child, they use their big beefy brains to form a connection with their partner, and their bodies grab two of their own genes. The first gene is unaltered, serving as their end of the deal. The second gene is altered semi-randomly to match the DNA of the parent that they're forming a child with. They're able to phase out imperfections, and they take on the best traits of the opposite parent in order to alter the other gene, which is a really cool concept. The resulting baby is always another Asari, though again with some traits of the opposite parent. Liara herself is a walking stat sheet of maxed out intellect but average wisdom and charisma. She doesn't always get jokes, and she tends to be painfully honest with whatever she's talking about. She explains that her mother had her with another Asari, which, as mentioned before, tends to be shunned to a degree. She's unsure of who her father is or was, and feels like whoever they are, they were probably too ashamed to stick around. While I do find Liara pretty interesting, I'd say that her personality tends to fall around the middle of the pack for me, with her people's race being easily the most fascinating thing about her for me, much like Tali. All in all, I'd say the supporting crew of this game are pretty damn good, minor faults aside. That said, if I took a big step back and really tried to cast aside my nostalgia for this game, I'd say that a lot of the time many of the squad's personalities suffer at the cost of delving into lore, or vice versa. What I mean by this is... Alright, let's take the two humans. What do we know about Caden? Well, he was shipped off to Brain Camp to become a biotic user. Okay, cool. Now, what about his personality? Well, he's a dude, I guess? He's pleasant to talk to. He follows orders. He's, I don't know. Now let's take Ashley. What's her personality? Well, she's cautious of other races that aren't human, and it borders on the edge of racism sometimes. That's a pretty interesting personality in its own way. Now what about her background? She's a soldier. She shoots enemies of humanity. Hooray! Now compare both of the humans to, say, Liara and Tali. Both of the alien races are fascinating to learn about biologically, historically, and culturally. Much of what these two tell you are fun to listen to. But their personalities, well, you've got the average fish out of water and the bookworm who doesn't always pick up on social cues. They aren't extraordinarily interesting or unique in their own rights. Whereas Rex is easily the most interesting in both the personality category and in the lore category regarding the history and culture of his people, at least to me. Garrus is pretty much the baseline, as he doesn't discuss the Turian culture as much as he goes on about the Citadel and C-Sec culture specifically. His personality is pleasant and polite, sometimes sarcastic, but not terribly interesting either. Overall, this makes for a yin and yang meshing of interesting cultural knowledge and semi-interesting personalities, which oftentimes hinder my enjoyment of specific squad members rather than fostering a strong connection to them. This brings us to the dialogue options. Like I mentioned, I can play Shepard as a justice-fueled paragon of righteousness who always sympathizes and understands the plight of those that I'm talking to, or I can play him as an asshole renegade who borders on xenophobia and callousness when treating other people a certain way. Or of course, a mixture between those two. But there are hardly any moments where I can't continue a conversation anyways despite my response. Oftentimes, the illusion of choice presents itself in a pretty strong way and makes me forget to think about what would have happened had I approached some of these dialogues with a different mindset. And that's definitely a great point in BioWare's favor. But I don't always feel like this is the best way to present a story. Simply placating or eliciting a pissed-off response from someone doesn't feel like it makes a huge difference in the overall dialogue which is being presented. And it makes me think that playing these same conversations differently wouldn't make that big of a difference overall in how much I can approach the story. It mars the replayability of a lot of these conversations, and it makes me think that I wouldn't have as much fun as I initially thought if I were trying to max out those renegade points.
So long, Rex.
Shepard.
So we carry on to the next mission, which has us landing on a planet being attacked by Geth. This is all relatively straightforward, as most of the mission is simply fighting through waves of Geth in the hope that we figure out why they're here, and also hopefully rescuing a woman's daughter. Of course, there's another Mako section, which is just as painful controls-wise, but less painful lengthwise. Well, eventually we do get to some answers, which yields some pretty interesting information about why the colonists, and by extension the corporation which enlisted the colonists, are here. So this corporation expanded here and discovered a new life form known as the Thorian. Little is known about this creature beyond the fact that its focus seems to be on its own survival. To help it survive, it emits a spore which infects and controls the minds of its hosts. It isn't outright aggressive or predatory, and it does its best to protect the life which it infects and controls, treating its hosts the same way that a blacksmith would treat their hammer or other tools. As such, humans are allowed to do what they would normally do until the Thorian decides that it needs them for something. The company here, Exogeny, decided to bring on some colonists to see what the Thorian would do with an abundance of hosts, using them to conduct general studies on what the creature does. Of course, Exogeny never told the people what they were really here for. So it's believed that Saren wants to try to utilize this mind control for his own ends. So we fight through more Geth and Krogan mercs, before making it up to one of the anchor points which the Geth has used to attach itself to the Exogeny HQ here. A more simplistic version of the Manan numbers puzzle from KOTOR 1 is employed here, which you have to solve to close a bay door and sever the anchor, which in turn causes the ship to plummet into the earth below. Then we gotta deal with the Thorian. I gotta say, this Geth attack is relatively recent, which makes me wonder why this building looks like it's from a Fallout game. Like, I get that it was beat to shit, but there's not even remotely an aesthetic which conveys space-age design or decoration. It just looks like a burnt-out Detroit building that was built in 1972. So we make it back to some of the scientists from Exogeny with the woman's daughter who we were trying to rescue. And one of the leader types here is making a stand against the idea that the Thorian should be neutralized by Shepard. So we shoot him.
As if we don't have enough problems. Now we're shooting each other in the back.
Actually, it was in the front. But either way, we grab some insecticide which has some neutralizing agents packed into it to stop the colonists which are now clawing their way like zombies at the Normandy. So I head through and run into more of the other zombies which we first encountered on Eden Prime. They're placed neatly in little clusters and sound like, I don't know, Redeads from Zelda or something. Or just zombies. They are creepy though. Mixed into these zombs are the colonists which are now fully fighting us from reaching the Thorian. If I choose to cap them, I get 2 renegade points per colonist. If I choose to knock them out, I get 2 paragon points. Fortunately, I was able to knock them out before reaching the dude that we first talked to when we arrived. He explains that the pain from resisting the mind control is unbearable, but he manages to blow his own head off before giving in to the pain and trying to attack us instead. Brutal. Well, we make it down to the Thorian, which reminds me a bit of the Flood Grave Mine from Halo. Oddly enough, it bombs out a green Asari to talk for it, which claims that we're trespassing and sees us as little more than nourishment or slaves. Good start. Well, there's no room for negotiations here, as the Asari and the zombies around the area begin attacking us. We have to fight our way up to the weak points and blast them, working our way through the waves. This whole endeavor is, well, it's tough and repetitive. You're basically fighting your way through these zombies and Asari clones, which are trying to stop you from destroying the 6 or so anchoring points which keep the Thorian held up. I think I gained 3 or 4 levels just from pushing up this building. I'd say that all in all, it's better than I would expect from a 2007 game, but it isn't particularly fun or compelling either. When I destroy the last point, the Thorian falls, and the Asari that it had hostage is released. She goes on to explain that she used to serve Benezia, the Asari matriarch who sided with Saren. Basically, Benezia planned on attempting to guide Saren to a more peaceful path, but his influence was stronger than she had foreseen. She willingly wound up joining Saren, and this Asari followed because he apparently has access to an alien ship which asserts his willpower onto those he indoctrinates just by his targets being near it for a prolonged amount of time. So basically, he already had mind control powers. In that case, it makes you wonder what he needed from this thing. Well, whatever it was, he exchanged the Asari here for knowledge from the Thorian, and the Thorian went on to use the Asari so that he could make clones of her. After that, Saren sent the Geth in to wipe the Thorian out, which explains why he was in no mood to speak with another snake oil salesman in its eyes. Well, eventually the Asari offers to transfer the same knowledge which Saren sought to you as well, which results in a sequence of crazy-ass Ridley Scott imagery being beamed into Shepard's mind. She explains to Shep that he basically just learned everything that happened to the Protheans, but that it'll take time to fully process. And with that, we're done with Pharaohs, leaving the Asari here to try to make amends for the destruction that she brought to the colony, and leaving the colony to try and rebuild. All in all, this was, it was an alright mission. It checks the boxes which make it a Mass Effect 1 quest, and the knowledge that we gain is, I guess it'll come in handy more later. Alright, before I continue on here, let's move over to my sponsor for a moment, Core. So I don't think I've ever said this in a video, but I've always wanted to make video games. It's been a passion of mine since I was a kid, and it's still something I ultimately would love to do at some point. I've tried using stuff like Construct, Unity, and GameMaker, but they never really clicked for me. So what does this have to do with Core? Well, Core is a new platform which utilizes the Unreal Engine. Not only can you make your own games, you can also play games from other creators for free. We're talking RPGs, co-op survival, shooters, anime. Needless to say, you can probably find something to play from a list of over 20,000 games. And if creating is your thing, then obviously you can do that too. No coding or art skills required. Which, thank God, because I cannot code for the life of me. So I set out to create my masterpiece, my magnum opus, the Skyrim of Core games. Yeah, that's a good enemy. Wait, we need dragons. That's too tiny. Oh yeah. More dragons, and a tomb. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes? Oh, Mr. Howard. Why, yes, I did. That was me. Creative director? Well, that's a lot of responsibility. Of course I'm up for it. Of course, if you'd rather just play games, then you'll be pleased to know that Core is currently running their Core Trials Player Tournament with a staggering $55,000 prize pool for those who want to try their hand at competing at certain games on the platform. And with Core making its early access debut on Epic Games, you can grab some free Epic exclusive skins if you decide to download it through the Epic Games client. And don't worry, you won't have to be competing against me. I've decided to abstain from the contest as I would probably sweep it. Whether you're ready to become the next AAA game director or you just want to chill out with some games, feel free to check out Core. It's completely free, just check out the link in the description. Thanks, guys. When we arrive back on the ship, we have another sit-down with the crew to discuss the events on Pharos. This has us linking with Liara to see if we can make any sense of the visions which Shepard gained. Pretty much the exact same cutscene plays out, or at least a chunk of it, and she goes, "Whoa, yeah, that's pretty fucked up. Yeah, nothing really important though. I'm gonna go take a nap. Glad to have you aboard, Liara." So we submit our report to the council again, and it makes me really start to dislike them. The report goes almost the exact same way as the first one about rescuing Liara. You have the Asari counselor who goes, "Hey, good job out there, little buddy. You rescued people." Then you have the Salarian counselor who goes, "Yeah, but it's too bad something ancient had to be destroyed. If only we could have studied it." And then you have the Turian counselor who goes, "You stupid fucking human. Of course you destroyed things to save humans. God, I hate humans." Wise counsel as always, thank you so much for your input. So we do another round of talking to the crew to learn more about them. Kaidan reminisces about how shitty things were for the first batch of human biotic users. Ashley continues to be a gigantic piece of shit.
Surprised to see you here, sir. Thought you'd be chatting up, what's her name? T'Soni? The crew's off limits with the regs against fraternization. And at least she looks like a woman. Of course, it could be politics. alien diplomat's daughter, us under orders to make nice with the bug-eyed monsters.
Then she goes on about what a family person she is, with her dad serving the military and her mom being a stay-at-home mom because she had to be. She talks about her 3 sisters and how she practically raised them. Then she goes, yeah, one time my youngest sister's boyfriend really wanted to fuck her before she was ready, and my options literally range from no means no to boys will be boys. Jesus, what a difference between those 2 dialogue options. Speaking of Jesus, Williams here then lays it on thick about believing in God, criticizing others for not believing. This was right after she started rattling off a 4-line poem for 30 seconds straight. I've never felt more conflicted about the writing of a character. I'm not talking about agreeing or disagreeing with her choices. I'm more talking about how she's written. She tells this whole tale about how her younger sister beat the fuck out of her boyfriend who tried to fuck her. Then she tells me a poem that she read to her father all the time. And then she says, yeah, I don't understand how all these heathens out here can look out at this big old galaxy and not believe in the Lord Jesus, amen. Of course, this is all back to back after she jealously complains about Liara being the only female aboard who Shepard can fuck without breaking protocol. It's just sweet fuck. It's way too much at once. Like, there are definitely shades of a realistic character here in Ashley. It makes sense for her to be religious after how she's talked and what she thinks. But who the fuck blabs out this fountain of information and exposition about their lives so quickly without some kind of time passing? There's no getting to know her better. We basically go from, what's this girl about, to, oh, okay, cool, now I know everything about her. I'm just kind of annoyed with the hastiness here is all.
I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I've enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly.
So we move on to Rex, who opens up just the right amount for a well-written character. He basically goes on about how he used to be a warlord of a small faction of Krogan who were at odds with another group led by an old-school Krogan named fucking Jared. What a difference in names there. Anyways, Jared wanted to fight everything and everyone. That's what he thought the Krogans should do. Rex, on the other hand, figured that constantly fighting might not be the greatest idea for his people to survive. So he began spreading the word that Krogans should be breeding for a generation in order to make up for the genophage which had been unleashed on them, and then focus on war after that. Well, it turns out that Jared was Rex's father, and as his son, he felt obligated to attend a meeting which Jared had arranged. Despite the ancient law forbidding all Krogans from fighting at these meetings, Jared had his men jump and kill Rex's loyal followers before Rex killed his own father and then escaped. Now Rex only has one goal: to recover an ancient set of battle armor which belonged to his family from a Turian collector which seized it from them after they lost the war. I know that last bit seems kinda sudden, but it kinda flowed pretty naturally after Rex touched on his family. I really do love the way that Rex is written. He doesn't have an extraordinarily deep personality, but he very much is who he is. He's basically a member of a barbarian tribe who tried to guide his people to a better way before getting outcast by the very type of thinking that he was trying to correct. When we get to the end of the road for his initial dialogue, we wind up with a quest to find his family armor, which I'll definitely be getting here soon. For now, let's move on to our next victim. Next up, we've got Garrus again, who regales us with another tale from C-Sec. In today's episode, our hero stumbled upon a case of a Salarian doctor who was supposedly harvesting the organs from his victims. Turns out that the guy was not only harvesting them, he was growing them inside of his own employees, and then harvesting them while they were knocked out without them knowing any better. He also apparently paid poor people for the opportunity to grow organs inside them as long as the harvest was good. Well, eventually C-Sec figured out that living test tubes were running around with their insides all beat to shit, and they tracked it down to this doctor. The guy wound up fleeing and taking hostages with him before escaping. Garrus tried to order the ship to be shot down, but it was deemed too dangerous for the hostages and the Citadel. It almost caused Garrus to quit right on the spot, but he stuck with the job until Shepard came along. And now he's got a potential lead on this doctor who now goes by Dr. Hart, which lines up with another quest for us to take part in. Next we have Tali, who doesn't have too much to offer. She still wants to bring something special back to her fleet, specifically something that gives them information on the Geth that they don't know. But that's all the important stuff that we get out of her for now. Finally, we have Liara, who goes from, "Gee, Prothean culture sure is fascinating," to, "Yeah, I think I want to fuck Shepard." Talk about a very short-term leap. I mean, I think it might be time to face the fact that this game isn't particularly long compared to the next two. And that's fine, but good God. The girl went from asking things with scientific curiosity to...
I wanted to know more about you, to understand what made you into the man you are. There is something compelling about you, Shepard.
It's worth noting here for that as much grief as I just gave Ashley for just unloading sheer background information in one fell swoop, her attraction to Shepard is at least built up a little better than Liara here. It's also worth mentioning that there are 3 possible romances in this game. 2 of them are locked to your gender and only one of them can win out altogether. Romance has always been a pretty big part of the Mass Effect universe, and I'm definitely not opposed to the idea of it. But in this game in particular, it almost feels shoehorned in when my 2 available romances are progressing at a rapid pace after completing one entire mission with my entire squad filled out. So I do some shopping around before heading to find Rex's armor, which is protected by my favorite enemies in the entire game, the GGG Pirate Armada. It takes a bit before I realize that I gotta hide in this back room to funnel them in, and thankfully they aren't smart enough to move up all at once. Eventually we recover our boy's armor, and he seems pretty happy with Shepard because of it. Though I do gotta say this felt a lot less like, "We shall take down the man who stole my family's legacy and avenge my people," and more of a, "Alright, we raided a random storeroom and my family is avenged. Great." Well, Garrus's mission is not much better. We track down this doctor who got away and board his ship. The inside is filled with renamed zombies which are labeled as test subjects. We take them out and find the doctor who claims that he isn't the person that Garrus is looking for. Garrus goes, "Nah, that's him for sure." So we dome him, and then that's it. That took like 4 minutes. I'm starting to think that they did not spend a lot of time on these companion missions. Well, now it's time to pick up our specialization class. To do this, I need to eliminate a rogue virtual intelligence system which has gone haywire on Earth's moon. This mission is about one of the most annoying missions I've ever had to slog through in a video game. Basically, you drive across the moon, take out some turrets, then head into one of these bases. You figure out that fighting these robots which have one-shotting capabilities is probably a bad call, so you run past them to destroy these conduits. I'm using a pistol, so these conduits take around 17 hits to destroy. I destroy all 8 of them slowly, which causes a toxic gas leak. But that's it, right? Nope, you gotta go to the other 2 and do the exact same thing. Fuck's sake. So you go to the next cluster of 8 and begin working on them before they put kinetic barriers at every single remaining conduit. That means that an additional 9 hits is necessary to destroy these things. I might have been able to angle around them so as to not worry about the shielding, but my pistol is only so accurate. I'd rather just blast through these shields and get the full developer-intended experience. At which stage when you're making your game mission do you go, "Actually, this is kind of annoying"? Apparently never with BioWare. So I run back out and every single hallway is now also guarded with time-wasting barriers. It's not hard, it's just time-consuming. I run to the final cluster and it's the exact same thing. Except these robots are smart enough to follow me through the tunnel, so I have to take them out. Now fortunately there seems to be a lot less of them in this one, so that's lucky. Breaking one of the conduits here rewards me with the grand prize of more fucking robots, which I somehow managed to take out without the cold embrace of death kissing me right on the lips. And after about 35 minutes of bullshit, I finally unlocked my specialization class. Jesus Christ. So the specialization class comes in 6 additional flavors, though you only get access to 2 of them depending on which base class you are. My choices are between Nemesis and Bastion. With Nemesis, my lift and warp attacks get some increases and bonuses. That doesn't sound too bad seeing as I use both of them quite a lot, especially lift. But Bastion increases the capabilities of my barrier and stasis, which is the much better way to go in my eyes. Basically, Bastion increases my barrier shield strength, which I desperately need. But more importantly, it makes stasis a fantastic skill. Stasis by default makes an enemy freeze, but it also makes them unable to take damage. With Bastion, they can take damage, making stasis go from mediocre to superb. Was it worth this mission's tedium? Yeah, probably. But I shouldn't have to be asking that question because a good mission and a good reward aren't mutually exclusive. So I know that I said that I'd hit the main quest stuff and then come back for the side missions, but we're kind of at the stage where a lot of these side quests are now available to us. So let's hit the few that are supposedly worth anything and carry on through the rest of the game afterwards. Well, spoiler, not a lot of them are particularly enriching. I talked to a fanboy who loves Shepard and keeps saying that his wife will love the autographs and pictures that we give him. I get interviewed by a lady who nosily pushes me to try to slip up on live TV. I give another reporter some intel on Fist's lair at the back of the club from earlier. And eventually we get to something more interesting. There's a lady whose sister is working at the Gentleman's Club from before. The sister is undercover for CSEC, and the lady wants her sister out of the job because it's dangerous. So I do what any good detective does. I run up to her sister and I go, "Hey, I know you work undercover for CSEC." Tactical. Well, she tells me to piss off before I run into another undercover agent who tells me to meet him at his office. And when I get there, he's like, "Why the hell would you do that?" And we work out a deal where the sister gets cut free in exchange for me helping the guy with his case. The case itself is figuring out the source of illegal weapon mods which are being sold on the station.
We have access to some of the most sophisticated weaponry there is. It's what gives us our edge. What do you suppose happens when we lose that edge?
These give criminals an advantage we can't afford to let them keep.
Your voice? Your voice mod.
Where can I find this, Jax?
Jax is down in the lower level of the markets.
Whew. Almost got banned by the GTA RP mods. So then you go and make the exchange which the guy wants you to do with no further action. I have the choice of telling the guy that I'm meeting with that he's under arrest, but I don't do that. Then I run the shipment back and, yeah, that's it. Damn, dude, that seemed like it was gonna really lead into a whole nother ordeal. But, that was really it. Fuck, man, what a waste.
I appreciate your help. It shows a lot of integrity. You didn't need to do anything after I let Jenna go.
Now I need to get these mods into evidence. Thanks again, Shepard.
And I feel like that chunk of side stuff that I just described is pretty much what fully shows off what Mass Effect has to offer in terms of side questing. It all tends to be menial bullshit which ranges from talking to people and performing a few tasks to the mind-numbing process of combing the galaxy for Asari writings and mineral deposits. It's boring, tedious, and only tends to be worth it from a loot perspective. I really don't care for it, and it tends to make the game itself worse. Now, I will say that quite a lot of it does actually pivot pretty well into Mass Effect 2, with Garrus's background stuff being a prime example of how his personality begins to really shape up based off of the events in the first game. But that's really no excuse when we're specifically evaluating the first game. I'll have a bit more to say on this later, but for now let's get back to the main missions. So we land on Noveria and I decide to take Liara because I remember her having a pretty important impact here. We walk out into a structure that's eerily similar to the landing pad on Pharos before running into these dickwads. They decide to get in our faces, telling us that they're the security force here and that they'll need to take our weapons. I tell them that I'm a motherfucking Spectre, and one of them says that's bullshit. Apparently they did not get the news out here. I pull my first renegade action in the game on these assholes and draw my weapon before a voice on the intercom tells these morons that they're morons. Said morons then let us keep our weapons, but not before going, "Well, you better not be so confrontational while you're here." Fuck you. Well, the lady on the intercom is a lot more friendly, and she explains that the security protocols exist to better serve the Novarian business people who go about their work in this almost industrial park of private corporations. It turns out that Benezia actually came here to one of these private corporations' property a few days ago. Talking to this absolute dickhead of a Zolarian yields some answers that she's still here, and that she has some Asari bodyguards accompanying her. Rex raises a good point here, claiming that the security is so heavy with guns and traditional weaponry, but seems to be a lot more lax with biotic-wielding Asari. The guy waves us away, claiming that the route to Benezia is cut off anyways by a snowstorm. This means that we get to drive again in another well-loved Mako sequence. But in order to gain access to the garage, I'll need a good boy pass from one of the workers here. The guy tells me that the idiot who I just talked to is a corrupt asshole who's been siphoning money, and that he was building a case against the guy before his office got shut down. The boss guy sent his thugs over to the office to find the evidence, which is comprised of the security force here on November. I have the option to talk my way through this instead of killing them, but that does not pan out. I really don't understand why either, seeing as we came to the agreement of, well, we'll just pretend that we didn't see each other. And then they just start opening fire afterwards. I don't know, maybe that group of 3 was removed from the battle or something? I'm not sure. Anyways, we grab the evidence and head back over to our guy for the garage pass. While all of this is just kind of another required hoop to jump through, I really still can't help but love the dialogue in this game.
You know what we did to cop killers on my world?
You're breaking the law for bribe money. You know what we do to dirty cops on my world?
Did Rex even have cops on his homeworld? I don't care, it's a great line. So we head back and the nice lady from before cuts me off and tells me that they need to convince this guy to testify against the corrupt overseer dude. If I can do that, she'll make sure that I get to Benezia with my Hot Wheels car. What I don't understand is that the Normandy could have easily just dropped the Mako near Benezia after figuring out this intel. I mean, maybe it would have triggered some kind of security alarm or something, I don't know. So we get the guy arrested, get our hall pass, jump into the Mako, and fight Geth all the way up and around this snowy-ass pathway to where Benezia is, and, Now this was an interesting style choice that BioWare decided to run with here. Everybody remembers the pitch-black shadow Minecraft characters that everyone turned into for this mission, and a lot of people have speculated that Mass Effect actually inspired Minecraft into existence. Nah, but apparently this is an issue with some lines of AMD processors, and it's fixed by digging into the configuration files and enabling the console so that you can pop a command in to view the models properly again. Now, unfortunately, the term properly here means that a lot of the lighting elements are disabled, making everything very bright. I guess this would definitely be a point for the Legendary Edition coming out, assuming it fixes this issue. So we stomp through this now brightened facility before running into these crazy-ass Dead Space-looking creatures which charge at us with reckless abandon and unleash these little mini poison creatures that suicide bomb us if they make it to our bodies. Eventually we make it to the mainframe, which has been shut down due to an emergency. The logic puzzle here is also very much the same thing from KOTOR 1, except this one mirrors the pillar puzzle that we found on Korriban. After completing it, the now very bright VI pops up to answer a few of our questions. Since we don't have corporation access, it can only answer things pertaining to what happened, and not specifically what we're dealing with. So it tells us that these creatures here were released somehow. To get to Benezia, we have to restart the main core here, or whatever, and reconnect the landline so that the main facility can interact with all the sub-facilities. Sounds like busy work, let's get to it. So we perform said busy work before making it to the next area where some resistance has formed against these alien life forms. One of the things that we can do here is develop an antidote for a bioweapon which was being developed alongside the whole alien monsters. This has us playing a minigame before one of Benezia's sleeper agents come down to try to take us out for interfering with her plans. We're told after this by one of the nearby scientists that Benezia came here with the gang.
I guess, yeah,
the
sure.
monsters that we've been fighting are a formerly extinct race known as the Arachni, which have been revived after an egg was found on the ship. This whole
I don't really
subject
care,
is
babe.
to keep
Just
me
no,
fixated,
no.
but not overly so. Well, eventually it all ties together when we make it to Benezia at last. When we confront the Asari witch, she completely ignores the idea that her daughter is fighting against her.
There was still some juice in the
To
carts.
send in her Asari commandos and Geth to destroy
There
her.
was still some juice in the
Three
carts.
separate waves before Benezia's entire demeanor shifts. She fights off Saren's mind control for a brief moment to tell us some stuff that we already knew about his ship being able to control minds and assert his will. Then she hits us with some new information. That the scientists here revived the Arachni so that they could delve into their ancestral memories and extract the location of another relay forcefully from their minds. Once Benezia got this info, she sent it to Saren, who is now on his way to find it. She hands us the same info before turning on us one last time. This time we can actually damage her, but the fight is about as easy as it was before. Benezia claims that although her wounds can be patched, she will never be able to freely control her own mind again, and bids farewell to her daughter before dying on the spot. Now, as touching as this whole ordeal is, it has a very minimal impact on someone who's never played the series. I feel the significance of it more due to the fact that I've interacted with Liara in Mass Effect 2 and 3.
But with the amount of background that we've gotten in this game alone, this whole scene kind of falls flat. Like, let's think about the amount of times that we've seen Benezia at this stage. It's been 2 times. This is the first time that Shepard has ever seen her, and then we kill her right afterwards. The way that she dies with Liara in your party does tug on the heartstrings a little more, but it's just too much forced emotion for someone that we've hardly interacted with. It could be different if Liara had more to say about her mother on the ship, but even that is pretty basic outline stuff, and not particularly in-depth information about her relationship with or her memories of her mother. I see what they were going for here, and I appreciate the voice acting as always, but I'm just not touched here in the same way that I think that I would be if the relationship had been developed a little more before the conflict occurred. In fact, the opposite instance of storytelling happens right after this moment between Benezia and us. So trapped in this big tube is the Rachni Queen, which Benezia ripped the answers out of. The Queen controls one of the half-dead Asari that we downed, and speaks through her in almost the exact same way that the Thorian did. What she tells us is that the reason that her children have been attacking everyone on sight was because they were pulled away from her and basically trained to be beasts of war, which caused them to go insane. She explains that her kind have no desire to fight and kill, and that they simply want to raise their young and live peacefully. So you can choose to believe that and set her free, or you can destroy the last of the Rachni race, effectively re-exterminating them. Rex urges me to kill them, claiming that his people were the ones that had to deal with them when they went nuts and started attacking people for some reason. Liara, on the other hand, preaches the opposite, stating that they can't be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors. This was a pretty neat little part of the story, and it effectively introduced a brand new character and race, made me forget about their fate, and feel bad for their plight. All in the span of, 5 minutes or so. So what's the difference between Benezia and the Rachni? Well, Benezia is a character that's built up to be something bigger, to have more importance. She's linked directly to a main character of the game, and yet she gets about as much background as the Rachni. My point is that they treated her the same way as the Rachni, but I care more about them because it's an isolated incident that might pop up again later, not an overarching theme throughout the game. If there had been constant talk about the Rachni over and over throughout the journey, and the big reveal is this thing in a tube, I'd have been upset about that too. So anyways, we start heading out while making sure to purge the remaining crazed Rachni.
I'm sorry, but I can't do that without proper code authorization.
Sic semper
Then we pop back onto the ship to discuss the next phase of the plan, which is looking like heading to Virmire. Ashley continues to berate Liara for no reason beyond being blue, before the two wind up confronting me and telling me to choose between them. Easiest choice in the game. I suggest a threesome. But Ashley is disgusted by that, so apparently we can't Captain Kirk our way through the game. But that's alright, seeing as we only really had 2 options anyways. So I pay Liara a visit, and she gives me this line.
You know where to find me if you want to have a more private conversation.
If that's not an invitation, I don't know what is.
You are very special to me, Shepard. But with all that's happened, Saren, the Geth, the Reapers, I do not know if we are ready for this.
Apparently, I do not know what an invitation is. But yeah, in addition to explaining and putting off the Asari mating ritual, Liara also explains that she doesn't really feel too bad about her mother dying since she was a completely different person at this stage. I guess it's an alright way of dismissing that perceived emotional bond which was never really fully developed, but I still think that I would have preferred for them to have picked up the slack and have her talk a little bit more about Benezia after her death. It is what it is, and I suppose it suits Liara's isolated scientist background in its own right. Ash, on the other hand, doesn't seem torn up about the situation at all, which isn't the byproduct of her being a tough human soldier. It's the byproduct of the game being written the way that it is. I actually split off into another save to see if the conversations are any different between Liara and Ashley here, but they're exactly the same except for the part where they talk about wanting to bang but not being able to yet. So Ashley opens up even more somehow, telling you that her grandfather was the only human to surrender to the Turians during the First Contact War. She explains that her family has been marked with a stigma ever since, and it explains why she hates other aliens so much, except that anger is woefully misguided. Because if you press her for details, she explains that her grandfather masterfully commanded his troops in the best way that he could. But every time that he shuffled them around or tried a new tactic, the Turians would just drop bombs on entire city blocks just to destroy a single unit of troops. This meant that every single time that her grandfather made a move, hundreds of civilians would die because of it. So he surrendered the garrison and everyone looked down on him because of it. Why isn't that anger directed at humans who don't have enough empathy to understand? I mean, she just explained all of this in her own words. Why are aliens getting the brunt of her anger?
What, Harvey?
I'm trying to see how this slot machine human is written, but there are so many weird, conflicting personality quirks that I can't help but write Ashley off as a bad character. So here's what I was initially thinking. Ashley is a well-written, short-sighted character. She's not dumb per se, but she's not intelligent enough to reflect on herself as a human and understand why she's built the way that she is. But even that theory is blown away because when you reject Liara for her, she goes from, "This stupid blue bitch, God I hate her," to, "Man, I feel kind of bad for her since you rejected her." And even when I try to justify that as a kind of, "Oh, now that I won I can feel empathy for her," there's still another conflict in her personality. Because when you reject Ashley and then go talk to her, she tells you everything about her grandfather, and then she wraps up the story by going, "Hey, you should probably talk to Liara about her mother. She's probably having a really hard time with that." We're talking about a girl that berates and counters Liara at every given opportunity. And yet if I choose Liara over her, there's no scorn or deepening of hatred, it's just the same dialogue as if you hadn't rejected her. And that's the same kind of issue that tends to stem from a lot of the earlier to mid BioWare games in general with dialogue. A lot of the time you look at the dialogue wheel and the Paragon and Renegade stuff, and you think, oh shit, the choices really matter here. But almost every instance outside of major events garnered the exact same results with a different inflection. I know that I initially complimented the system as the game telling its story with a different tone, but that idea actually falls a lot more flat the more that I play the game. I was excited about it at first, but when it's painfully clear that 2 out of 3 or sometimes 3 out of 3 dialogue options will give the exact same response, it becomes a lot more dull. Again, I remember Mass Effect 2 being a lot better about this, but the first game definitely still needed a lot of tweaks to truly give you the choices matter experience. Anyway, so I make my rounds to all of the squad members here, and it's pretty clear that we're nearing the end based on the amount of stuff that they tell you. Rex tells you that he likes being a mercenary, and that he tries not to think about the plight of his people since it's a lost cause. Garrus tells you that he thinks that Saren should be killed and not arrested, so that he can't get away or be protected by the Council. Tali thanks you for treating her like a real crew member, and not a second-class citizen. Kaidan's actually probably the most
Piss me the fuck off.
Maybe I did.
I love you too.
The extreme.
I'm trying.
Just checking Bowser for fairies. Yeah.
I know Sheen and they're watching my fucking 600-pound addiction. Oh my fucking god. Okay. you a good boy? You a good boy? You a good boy? Harvey.